There's proof it happened. If you can play around with this long enough, you can turn yourself into a fool. Yeah. If amphibians evolved before mammals, which is what they say, why do some amphibians have 5 times more DNA than mammals? And some amoeba have 1,000 times more DNA. Why would a simple life form, like you guys like to talk about, have 1,000 times more DNA than some of the mammals? Think about that for 5 minutes. Scientific American. They've known this for a long time. Michael Denton, Evolution in Crisis, fabulous book. The really significant finding that comes to light from comparing the protein's amino acid sequences is that it is impossible to arrange them in any sort of evolutionary series. There is little doubt that if this molecular evidence had been available a century ago, the idea of organic evolution might never have been accepted. Michael, I think I disagree. Some people want to believe in evolution so badly, they would believe it if there were no evidence at all. If I get done exposing 100 lies in the textbooks, and if you evolutionists even admit, hey, Hovind's right, all of these things are lies, you're still going to believe in it. You're still going to choose to believe in evolution because you don't want God telling you what to do. Just admit it. You're a rebel. You don't want God telling you what to do, and you would believe it with no evidence at all. I know you would, okay? This discovery should speed crop development. What is this about? Back in 2005 in Farm, they said they were deciphering the DNA of rice. And they discovered that rice and maize, like corn, has more DNA than humans. Should we arrange plants and animals in order of the quantity of DNA they have? Would that be a way to arrange things for evolution? No, I think the fact that this DNA code, deoxyribonucleic acid, this code is complex. It shows there's a creator, a common creator did them. They're going to tell you kids in school that the human DNA is 98.2% similar to chimps. How many have ever heard that before? There's only a 1.4, 1.6% difference, okay? Really? This one says orangutans, 96% similar to humans, proving we had a common ancestor 15 million years ago. Yep, you can see the similarities between the DNA, between the chimps and the humans right there, folks. I mean, obviously, look at, he's looking down the stick, going to whack his brother on the head with something. That's typical. This textbook right here says, chimpanzees have not accumulated many differences. Overall, the nucleotide sequences of human and chimpanzee genes differ only by 1.6%. Is that true? Well, Barney Maddox, a leading genome researcher, said, concerning the genetic differences, he said, now the genetic difference between human and his nearest relative, the chimpanzee, is at least 1.6%. That doesn't sound like much, but calculated out, that's a gap of 48 million nucleotides. There are so many billions of nucleotides, 1.6% is 48 million differences. A change of only 3 nucleotides is fatal to an animal. You change 3 of them and it dies. And there are 48 million differences. He said there is no possibility of change. I agree. I agree. Humans and chimps may be slightly less closely related than had been thought, according to new research. It's long been believed the DNA of chimps and humans is about 98.5% identical, making chimps our closest relative. But Roy Britton of the California Institute of Technology, CIT, conducted a new analysis comparing 779,000 individual components of DNA from humans and chimps and found more differences than previously noted. Britton concludes that humans and chimps share only 95%. Oh, so instead of 1.6% difference, it's 5% difference. This is back in 2002, Washington Post, okay? Well, let's see. Human-chimp DNA difference trebled, September 2002. We are more unique than previously thought, according to new comparisons of human and chimpanzee DNA. It's long been held that we share 98.5% of our genetic material with our closest relatives. That now appears to be wrong. In fact, we share less than 95% of our genetic material, a 3-fold increase in the variation. New research says 7.7% difference from Nature magazine 2004. So in 2004, they said we have 7.7% difference. 2004, think about that. Because in 2006, Discover magazine said there's only 2% difference. Well, they're way behind on their research, or they're deliberately lying. This is a lie is proven wrong a long time ago. The human-chimp DNA difference trebled. The new value came to light when Roy Britton, CIT, said he became suspicious. He himself developed the technique of how to do it. You should see how they actually calculate the difference. It would, in a court of law, they would laugh at you and say, this is evidence for what? Similarity? We'll get into that in a minute. Okay. Britton himself developed decades ago at Caltech with colleague David Cohn by measuring the temperature at which matching DNA of two species comes apart. You take the DNA and you heat it up until it breaks down. And that's how you determine if they're related. What temperature does the DNA break apart at? You've got to be kidding. This proves you're related because they melt at a certain temperature? But the technique only picks up a particular type of variation called single base substitution. These occur whenever a single letter differs in corresponding strands of DNA from two species. So if you got a DNA strand, two different species, and one letter is different. Question. Are there any sentences where you can change one letter and totally change the meaning of the sentence? A woman without her man is nothing. They asked all the men in the class, how would you punctuate that? They said, a woman, comma, without her man, comma, is nothing. All the women said, a woman, semicolon, without her, comma, man is nothing. Wow. Same words, different punctuations. How about, let's eat, Grandma. Let's eat, Grandma. What exactly does that mean? Let's eat, Grandma, or let's eat, Grandma? Just a comma, right? Completely changes the meaning of the sentence, right? Wow. She's giving this money to me. 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 Very different meanings, just with the emphasis. You got to put the emphasis on the right syllable. So this could also change the meaning. So one little tiny difference in the DNA might make a gigantic difference in the outcome. So even if they are 99.9% similar, it's not evidence for evolution. How about this one? Slow Animal Crossing, or slow Animal Crossing. One comma, right? Wow. There are two other major types of variation than the previous analysis ignored. Insertions, where they insert new information, like that comma we just put in, occur whenever the whole section of DNA appears in one species but not in the corresponding strand of the other. So all of a sudden you're comparing the chromosome strands and one's got a whole section chopped into it. Okay, well, hold it. How would you, they ignore that. It's an insertion or a deletion, same thing. Deletions mean a whole piece of DNA is missing. So they just ignore that and they're counting similarities, ignoring in insertions and deletions. They call it indels, insertions and deletions. Together they are termed indels, and Britton seized his chance to evaluate the true variation between two species when stretches of chimp DNA were recently published on the internet by teams from Baylor College of Medicine in Houston and from the University of Oklahoma. When Britton compared 5 stretches of chimp DNA with the corresponding pieces of human DNA, he found that single base substitutions accounted for a difference of 1.4%, very close to the expected figure. But he also found the DNA of both species was littered with indels. There were all kinds of insertions and deletions. His comparisons revealed that they add around another 4% to the genetic difference. We're not any more different than we were, Britton says, but we see a bit more divergences than before because insertions and deletions are taken into account. It almost triples the difference. Again, even if we have similar DNA to chimps, that does not prove any relationship. It would be same designer wrote the code. Nick, you do a lot of code writing. How many similarities are there between Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint? How many identical lines of code would there be? Do you think they both go to the same spell check? Probably. Do you think they both have a similar startup menu? I don't know how many lines of code there are in Microsoft PowerPoint. Tens of thousands. And how many lines of code are there for Microsoft Word? I bet if we looked at all the Microsoft programs, we would find tens of thousands of identical lines of code. They cut and paste because that's what you want it to do. Push here, this happens. Do you do that kind of stuff too, code writing? So does similarity in the code prove that they both evolved from an explosion in an electronics factory or that somebody wrote the code? If there are similarities between human and chimp DNA, that still doesn't prove an evolutionary relationship, is my point. The result is only based on 1 million DNA bases. So all they checked is a 1 million out of 3 billion. So they checked 1/3000th. 1 out of 3,000 was checked and found a significant difference. Enough it would kill the animal if it tried to change from one to the other. It's just a glance, he says. But the differences were equally split between junk regions that do not have any genes and gene-rich parts of the genome, suggesting they may be evenly distributed. Britton thinks it'll be some time before we know what it is about our genes that make us so different from chimps. He thinks the real secrets could lie in regulatory regions of DNA. Oh, now we're into a whole new can of worms. What is regulating this? Not only do you have the code for the computer, how is it read by your machine? How is it regulated? No, now you got major differences again. It'll be a while before we understand them, he says. That's from the National Academy of Science back in...
It's like when they clone animals, right? If you can get a clone of your dead cat, but it won't look the same. It has the same exact DNA, but
it won't look the same, cloning. The function of only 1%, some say 3%. Now, this is years ago when Henry Morris wrote this. Only 1%, some say 3%, of the human DNA has been determined. If 95% or 98% of this small amount is similar to chimps, it still does not prove common ancestry. The French and American scientists mapped chromosome 14, the longest sequence to date, and the sites of more than 60 disease genes, including one linked to early onset Alzheimer's. The feat enlisted nearly 100 researchers, marks the fourth of 24 human chromosomes mapped so far as part of an international effort. Scientists at Genoscope, the French National Sequencing Center, said the chromosome is comprised of more than 87 million pairs. One chromosome, and you got 46 in each cell. One of them has 87 million rungs on the ladder. That's a long ladder. You're a nurse, you probably had a lot of study of this kind of stuff getting your training. All of which have been sequenced so that the chromosome's map includes no gaps. At the present time, this is the longest piece of contiguous DNA that has been sequenced. We made an effort to close all the gaps, said Genoscope's director. The researchers described chromosome 14 and its 87 million pairs of DNA, a fraction of the total 3 billion pairs found in the human genome.